Welcome to the Identity Work Podcast. If you are a high achiever struggling to find purpose in work, then join us as we discover how to create more meaning in work and life. Welcome to today's episode of the Identity Work Podcast. I am super excited because today we have Larry Angelilli, a former CFO who just recently retired. So we're going to get a very interesting perspective. I'm also very excited because, Larry, you were named Best Legs in high school. Is that right?
It's the only award I had ever won in my lifetime was. So yeah, I treasured it. I had the best legs in the class, in the senior class.
Wow. It's a shame
Yeah.
this podcast is just audio and we don't have the visual to accompany that. But you may be the only, public company CFO who's been named Best Legs in high school. Well, I'm particularly excited. I've had the honor and privilege of getting to know Larry when we worked together at Moneygram. He is very well respected. I look up to him personally and professionally. He's a very gifted communicator, extremely gifted communicator, and a lot of where I am today and a lot of kind of the thesis behind my company I started, Arvo, was really inspired by the journey that Larry and I went through during the Moneygram turnaround. So anyways, thank you for joining us today, Larry, and I really appreciate you.
No, thanks for having me.
All right. Larry, we had lunch recently, and you commented that it was a little weird to think that the peak of your career is now kind of likely behind you. I know we're starting out with a very vulnerable question, but
I'm gonna need a psychiatrist by the end of it.
Yeah, but to the extent, like, I just thought that was an interesting comment. And would you be willing to kind of share a little bit more about
Yeah,
that?
I mean, when you're living your career and you have your ups and downs and you're climbing the ladder, or you're doing whatever you're doing and you reach your goals, or don't reach your goals, but you're always looking forward. And I think that's, so when you're 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, like you're still like wondering or hoping or trying to do that next thing or accomplish that next thing. And then all of a sudden you go home one day and there isn't a next thing. It can get inside your head. And I really started to appreciate, I think, people that I've known. My father-in-law, he went through a period when he retired. And I think it's just, finding meaning or like, and fortunately for me, I like being retired, and I'm really old and I'm ready. But I was very, very lucky in that I did accomplish a lot of my goals and I could check those boxes and I could say, yeah, okay, I did that and I could be proud of it. And, but I think it's something that if somebody tells you that it doesn't go through their mind, I can't believe it, because it's just a massive change. And I used to hear, like, I had a brother-in-law once who told me, this was like a long time ago, I'm going to retire when I'm 49 or 50. And I was like, I can't even imagine that. And I was never that way. And I think part of it too is I was really lucky that I loved what I was doing. So that wasn't, just part of you. And I don't want to get too like, psychiatry thing here, but like, you have to be able to identify yourself as something other than your career. And I think, and you have to, and fortunately, I think, have that, but it's still, I think about it all the time. I get up in the morning, I don't set my alarm anymore. And it's like, it's just kind of strange. And it's been almost a year now and I still think about it. And what's next? And, I don't know, you know?
Yeah. And you talked a little bit about having your identity outs outside of your career a little bit. Can you talk to us about what that's meant for you?
Well, I was really into photography, like, when I was in high school and in college, and, I was fascinated by digital photography. I mean, I was one of the old analog guys, you know. I was the photo editor. We used the dark room, and digital photography has just been amazing to me. And I had to learn it. It's not like analog. It's not like you can know all you want. So I bought my dream camera, and then I have all the software, and I've been just really enjoying actually kind of being a photographer again. And then I'm on a couple non-for-profit boards, and the interesting thing about me is that I'm sort of the finance guy that deals with crises, and these are 2 arts organizations, and every arts organization in the United States is having some sort of existential crisis right now. And so I've actually been deeply involved. It isn't just like being on a board and going to cocktail parties. I mean, I've actually been sort of like acting like the CFO of these institutions that are having serious challenges and need financial expertise, and so I've been involved in that. And then I've actually been doing a lot of kinda episodic consulting, and I've kept up with the industry. I sort of an industry expert on cryptocurrencies and stable coins, and I was the architect of, like, the flow for MoneyGram when we did those both, and so I've been actually in demand as everybody's trying to figure out, like, what the hell's going on out there, and is it real, and, so that's been keeping me busy. Actually, and the best thing about it is it's not like I'm putting, you know, PowerPoint decks together. It's just, really kinda understanding the industry and explaining it, and Steven knows this. I was kind of my nickname was sort of the professor, and I been doing that. And actually, in that vein, I'm giving a guest lecture at SMU next month. So I've been busy, and then I just, my wife and I like hanging out together, and we've been traveling, and we've been doing stuff. So life is good. Like I can't, like if I complain, like no one's gonna feel sorry for me. I really, it's been pretty good.
Wow.
How
What
did
a
you decide what different things you wanted to put into the bucket? I imagine you were running straight line on a career for decades, then one day that stopped and you have infinite space and time, and there's lots of things that have filled it. How intentional was your decision of like how to craft this free time versus things just coming in, and what did that process look like?
You know, some of it I was involved with while I was still working, and I had to, uh, being CFO is sort of a relentless job, like it doesn't ever stop. And so I had to sort of start to back away, especially at MoneyGram. It was just one thing after another. And so it was nice actually. So I was sort of like, boy, I'd love to get back involved. And everybody was asking me if I would. And so that was sort of just momentum. I think the photography thing, and also um, I bought a fly rod and I've been like trying to become a fly fisherman. That has been not successful so far. It's too hard. Like I love fishing, but it's been too hard. So I don't know. It's stuff that I've just been. I think some of the stuff goes back decades. It's just stuff I've always wanted to do, and I couldn't.
And maybe we'll take a step back now through your career. You've talked about just chasing, kind of chasing or next step. What's next? Walk us through your career a little bit more. I know we just jumped right into the heart to heart of it, but you're born and raised in Detroit. Like, what interested you in finance? You've talked about a couple crossroads in your career. Some of those you were forced to make a decision. You spoke about a layoff at some point as well. And so I just love to kind of learn a little bit more about, yeah, about some of the major crossroads in your career and how you made decisions. Because a lot of our listeners are kind of in that mid 30s range, or even younger in their careers. I spoke to an SMU class earlier this week, and so hopefully they're all listening.
Well, in my 30s, actually, it
Yeah.
was like one of the toughest parts.
Mm. Talk to us more about
And
that.
I think it's a tough time to go through careers. I don't think I was alone. I mean, the funny thing was, and this is just the kind of student I was, like I wasn't a great student. I didn't really, I always thought like, if someone paid me to get an A, maybe I'd do the work. But since I was like not getting paid, like I sort of tried to minimize the amount of work I did. And what happened was that if I was interested in it, I would jump into it and I would be a good student. And if I wasn't interested, I'd say, well, that's just irrelevant. I don't need to know that. And then I wouldn't do it. Not a good idea. I don't recommend that. And I actually got my master's degree so that I could hide my transcripts for my undergrad so no one would ever see it. So what I was fascinated by, so I was an econ major, and when I took money in banking, it almost like it just wasn't even work. Like I read the textbook just because I wanted to, and I was not a big reader. I just And I was fascinated, and ironically too, like, I originally wanted to be an architect, and I was always fascinated by bank architecture. It was always like, "Wow, something really important is going on in there," and I wondered what it was. And so when I learned about the economy and learned about banking, it just felt natural. I just loved it. And it's always like the first time in my life where I was going to school and I liked going to class and I liked reading the text and I aced everything. And and that's when I decided like, wow, I'd love to be a banker. Um the problem there is that back in those days, I don't know if people do this anymore, the banks would check your transcripts, and so that was sort of a problem. Um, so I actually started out as a teller to get my foot in the door so that they wouldn't look at my transcripts and I could get into the management training program. And it just what I think is that every person, they're only good at one thing. Like, if you're good at 2 things, like, you're special. If you're good at 3 things, like, I don't know, you belong in some sort of medical study, okay? And so I just found that it just came so natural. I just understood it even as a trainee right out of college. And every department they ran me through and everything I did, I just got it. And I thought, well, this is just like a dream because that's the kind of student I was. It was like, well, if I like it and I'm interested, I'm gonna work my ass off. And so I did. And I was like an immediate, like, rising star, and I'd been this, like, mediocre nobody, like, I don't have an educational pedigree, I didn't have good grades, I went, like, mediocre student from a state school, like and then all of a sudden, I'm getting chosen for all these things, and then went to a bigger bank, and then I jumped into the corporate side and they trained me in capital markets and then it went on from there and that's why I said earlier, I was just so lucky is that I got to do what I love to do in a profession actually that paid well. And like, but what was happening also at the same time is that the pace of change in banking and in financial services in general around the world was just accelerating. In the 80s were really difficult. I think there was, this fancy term, financial disintermediation, which, by the way, all the fintechs, like, that's what they do. And I started to notice that actually banks were becoming somewhat irrelevant. And I thought I needed to learn capital markets. And I got recruited. It's a long story. I can't get into it, but I ended up like going to Chrysler Corporation, which was the 12th largest company in the United States at the time, on their treasury function. And then they taught me asset-backed securities and fixed income and rating agencies and then Chrysler went from one crisis to the other. So it was almost like getting a PhD in liquidity management and crisis management. And they had some of the best people I've ever seen, like their CFO, Steve Miller. He's an icon. And my eyes were this big and I just loved it. And even though, like, we're, like, in this massive pre-bankruptcy, like, crisis, I got to do all these really cool things, and we didn't go bankrupt, and we made it. And but actually, after we made it, then we got into another crisis, and I was further up the ladder, and they sold the company that I was treasurer of to survive, and that's how I ended up leaving Chrysler, and it was devastating. Um, and at first I got laid off because they couldn't bring me back to Detroit, and they were, like, going down, and I ended up getting back in because somebody knew me and liked me, and then we got bought by Bank of America, and then that took me in a whole 'nother direction. But I think that, my attitude was, and I think it comes from my upbringing maybe, is I didn't have, like, a fancy piece of paper that I could show somebody. I didn't go to, you know, Harvard, okay? I didn't, like, and I think people just assume, and also I'm sort of like, I laugh and, like, I'm light, and I think people think you're a lightweight. I think that if you're kinda maybe fun to be around and you're a mediocre student from a state school, like, you're probably not very smart. And so I had to keep fighting that, and I think that was in the back of my head. And so every chance I got, I would be like, "Ooh, I could learn that, I could learn that," and I'd work with these people and find out that, like, they didn't have a magic potion, like, they didn't, like, um and I started to realize, like, I can do this. But I viewed every job until the last one as a stepping stone, and that's, I think, part of the whole retirement thing, right? No more stones to step on, like, no more stepping stones, but every single job, and in fact, the MoneyGram job, I had given up on the idea of being a CFO. It was the financial crisis, I was in the middle of it. Actually, if you saw the movie, it was the book by Lewis,
Big Short.
The Big Short, okay? I knew those people in that movie. I was at some of those things, okay? I was in that, and it was so traumatic, and then, my company was in the middle of mortgages and residential real estate, and I was head of corporate finance at the time. We were running out of our checking account. I mean, it was literally Chrysler from the '80s. Everything I learned at Chrysler in the '80s, I applied to that job, and we survived. And then when we survived, I was sort of out of a job. And I took the MoneyGram job because I thought, well, I was starting on interviews and people were noticing I had gray hair, and that was a problem. And it just seemed fascinating. And I took the biggest demotion of my life to do it, but it was so cool. Like, I thought, "Ooh, this looks like fun, and I'll take a step back. I need a job, okay? It's not like, and I'll just do this because it's gonna be fascinating, and it'll be a stepping stone to something." And of course, the stepping stone to being CFO, but at the time, I thought I had actually made a mistake when I joined the company. So it didn't I I used to tell people, I would say, my career after, let's see, the Gulf War was when the first crisis started at Chrysler, where our sales just fell like 40%. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And I was Indiana Jones running through the tunnel with the ball rolling behind me. And that's how I described it. And so I just kept trying to run faster than the ball. So I would look for stuff where I could learn something new and use it as a stepping stone to get to the next thing, and it came in super handy because every single one of those jobs, actually, I used that experience as CFO of MoneyGram. I mean, it was really almost uncanny.
Were there any of those decisions along the way that were particularly challenging or difficult to make? Um, to, I'd be curious to hear. Seems like a lot of them were really fun. You're sort of like following the joy. Were there any of them that felt like not very joyful or not very fun,
Yeah,
but important for the progress?
well, a couple of them, 2 of them actually, if I wasn't so risk averse or married and have young children, I might have quit. Like, within my first 9 months on the job. There were 2 of them, actually, Chrysler and then MoneyGram, where I thought I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I hated it, and they were dysfunctional, and I was sort of in a position where I just didn't like the people, and I didn't think we were doing the right thing. And then all of a sudden, management changed, and then like my life changed instantly. And it was both cases, and those were two of the best jobs I ever had. But I did make it one move. I joined a private equity firm, and totally against my better judgment. And actually, I was warned. I was warned by one of the guys who referred me in there, and he said, they're kind of weird, and it's like not a pleasant place. But I had this idea that, and it was insecurity, I think, but the private equity hires like really smart people. And if I could get hired by a private equity firm, especially this was a big one, I mean, 20 billion, that would be my sort of certificate of intelligence. Like, you know what? Like, you don't get a job like that. And I got hired as director of underwriting in a $20 billion PE firm, and hated every single day. From like the first day to when it finally ended, it was horrible, miserable. I can't even describe how much I hated it. But I learned I mean, I can't tell you how much I learned. And so it was sort of like getting paid to go to school, but um so it didn't hurt me. And actually it was funny. Did give me credibility, and I did understand MoneyGram at the time was actually controlled by private equity. It really gave me an insight into how they thought, why they did what they did. It's not always obvious. And so, but I tell you, that was a that was like an 11-month experience that was just pure misery for how many days is 11 months? Every single one of them. It was horrible.
Yeah, and how do we know, like, when to stick it out and when it's just, like, we made a wrong choice and we need to pivot?
I tell my kids this all the time. Um, don't even like for the first 6 months, like, just put your head down. It's too soon. Because I've been wrong, like, every time. Like, I think the thing about getting new jobs, and these are even jobs that I liked, okay? You go through this dance, right? You go through these interviews and people, they woo you. Like when they make a decision, like you're their guy, like then they woo you. And that's very flattering. It's like, it's heady stuff, okay? And then you get the letter and then you sign it. And then on your first day of the office, they kind of say to you, well, you don't know shit. Like, sit down. Like, this is like, and you're like, hey, wait a minute. You loved me like before I joined, and now you're treating me like I don't know anything, and you don't know anything. And you don't, you even have to learn where the restroom is. Like you can't, so you have to give yourself time to, number one, establish your credibility and earn the respect that you expect to get. You don't get respect without earning it in the real world. And so it takes at least 6 months for that to happen. And then after 6 months, if things don't look different to you, then that's the first sign. But I would say it takes 6 months. I think this is sort of off topic a little bit, but I think this is the disease that happens, that what I've seen happen to a lot of people that work for me that do have incredible pedigrees, is that they think that because they went to that school or they had that success in a prior life, that somehow you're supposed to give them credit for that. You weren't there for that. Okay. You have to. And so I kind of looked at myself like, how do I act? Okay. When I was at MoneyGram, I sit people down and say, I don't want to hear from you about what you think is wrong for at least 4 months because you don't understand it. Okay. And when I worked here, if I had been able, I would have made a ton of mistakes in my first 6 months because I didn't have enough information. So just be a sponge, learn, okay? But know that you can't walk in and within 30 days tell me what you think the answer is. I won't believe you. I don't care how smart you are. And some people were highly insulted by that, like, but I think so. I mean, I'm sort of like, I understand it, but it's still very difficult to go through. And I do think it takes 6 months. And then there's the whole squishy thing about corporate culture. And I think private equity, I just didn't like the culture, and that was part of it too.
I think part of what Adam and I are like trying to figure out through this podcast and our listeners is just like, what does meaningful work look like? And some of the things that I've kind of heard from you of like, have to be interested in it. Like, we're basically trying to figure out what do we do with our lives. And what I've heard from you is like, do something you're interested in because you're going to like it and likely going to be successful. You talked about not liking a job because the management team switched out, which is probably people are going to have a big impact on it. And then you've talked about being in roles where you like learn a ton, where you're learning. Like, what else would you say, like career advice to us trying to figure out what to do with our lives and like how to have a fulfilling career? Like, what are some of those key ingredients to make that pie, if you will?
So, when I was in high school, I always thought like my senior year in high school was like the best year of my life. Like it was all these people have all these painful memories from high school. I
And this
just
was
like
the best legs year, just to
had
be
a blast,
clear.
right? Yeah, it was the legs. And
Unrelated best year of my
Unrelated,
and
life.
we had this
totally,
little posse of guys, and every single one of them except for me and one other guy went into medical school and became doc. And so now you're young and you have to make a decision, right? Like you don't if you're gonna go to medical school, it's like a calling. Like you have to and you can't change your mind. And every time I see those guys, and we've gotten together, I'd go to Detroit and we would still get together and have fun, or I'd see them at reunions and stuff. They all hate their jobs. And they all think like I'm the luckiest guy in the world. And I feel terrible about that. And I think that it's really hard to be good at what you do if you don't like it. And I do think you reach these points of inflection. And you mentioned, Stephen, about when you're in your 30s. Okay. Like when you're 35 years old, and if you wake up and you say, this doesn't turn me on like I thought it would. Like, I wish I had done something else. I think there's still time to zig, whatever. Not if you're a doctor, right? Because you don't even become a doctor until you're in your 30s. Okay. But that's a luxury that I think certain careers provide. And it but it takes courage, and it takes, I think, self-awareness that you have to do that. Because what I see happen when that doesn't happen is that when you get into your late 40s and 50s, you may think it's ageism, but it could be that you're just burned out. Like you're not keeping up with it. You're not into it. Your head's not in the game. And I know a few people, very few, that have actually had that sort of spiritual awakening that said, maybe there's a fork in the road here and I need to do that. And I encourage everybody to at least go through that exercise. Now, if you love what you're doing and your company goes out of business or they lay off 25% of their people or whatever, and you're at that crossroad, that's a different story. Okay. But if you are finding that, when your alarm goes off in the morning and you have to drag yourself out to go, it's not for everybody. And I think that, but everybody is good at one thing. And I do think that you need to find what it is. And when I was like in my 20s and 30s, if you had put me on the couch and, said, what motivates you? What makes a company attractive to you? Why do you want to work there? I'd say probably 2/3 of it was prestige. I wanted that sort of I wanted to be at a cool place, or I wanted the big time. I wanted to play in the big leagues. And that was really important to me. And when I got older, it wasn't anymore. It was about the content of the work and the people that I was working with and the satisfaction of changing things and making things better. And that's where the satisfaction came from. But I think we in a society still have you still need pedigree. You still need it. And so that's where I got mine. I kept trying to compensate for the fact that I didn't think I had pedigree, and I had to outgrow that, and then when I finally outgrowed it, is that a word? Um, then I became, I think, I don't wanna say self-actualized, but, like, then it was sort of like, wow, like, um and the stuff that I was able to accomplish in my kinda 40s, 50s, 60s, I just blew me away. I mean, I never would have dreamed that I would be able to do it, the other thing too, and this is I think curiosity is a recessive gene, and if you find that you're not curious about your career, like, if you're not reading about it like an extracurricular, if you do not follow your competitors, if you do not care or watch what the best practices are, and you have to find out, right, what they are, and you have to find out, like, who's doing it better than you and who's cool and not cool and why, like, I was always that way. I was always like a real student of our competitor, no matter where I worked, and that curiosity led to, like, I just created my own job. I was like it was, and actually some of the best jobs I ever had were jobs that nobody had had before me and no one's ever had since. But it was curiosity, and I'm always shocked at some of the attitude, like, I think a lot of people think they're a great employee if they go to you and say, "Tell me what you want me to do, and I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna do it great." Okay, like, yeah, that's cool, but I really sometimes maybe you need to figure out, like, what you should be doing. I can't tell you what to do. Like, and that's the magic, and I think it comes to you naturally if it's just stuff that you absorb because you are interested and you're curious.
It was good.
Am I answering, like, I get kinda on these tangents, like, I'm like
That's great.
No, it's so good. I think the long pause is Steven and I both deeply pondering decisions we've made in the past 10 years of our career and wrestling with were those things good or not good. Um,
And
I
by
think
the way,
particular
making a mistake is not a mistake. Like, no one can predict the future. That's another luck thing. Okay, like, I went into bad situations that I hated, and then turned out like some of the best things ever happened to me. I thought this was like the ultimate insult when I heard it, but my mother-in-law told me this once. She said, "You could fall into a pile of manure and come out smelling like a rose." I was like and I think the reason I was insulted was I thought that was sort of like, "Well, you're just a lucky dog, okay?" And, like, really, it's really because I was still in a situation where I was into it, and I was studying it, and I was able to make it better, and that was very satisfying and actually led to success in my.
You mentioned at one point, kind of mid-30s are really hard, and it's not too late to potentially take a pivot. Like, if there's people listening to this who are waking up every day kind of dreading going to work, like, what's, like, one thing they could do, like, one step they could do, to, I don't know, think about maybe something else?
Well, I think, this is I'm not a psychiatrist, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express. I think part of what happens too in job satisfaction is that you need to be known. Like, a lot of people toil in anonymity. Like, you're in your office, you're in your cube, you're working from home, which I think is, like, really dangerous. Okay? Like, if nobody knows who you are and how good you are, you're not gonna get credit for how good you are. And that leads to frustration, and that leads to unhappiness. And what I would do is, like, sort of, like, invent things that I wasn't asked to do to become well known. And some people say, well, that's politics or that's, whatever pejorative term you want to use. It isn't. Okay. It's like it isn't like sports where everybody puts your stats in the stat book every day and they can look at you and say, well, you hit 2 home runs yesterday. You're a star. Okay. Like you hit 2 home runs in the business world and nobody knows you hit 2 home runs. You're going to be a very frustrated person and you're not going to like your job and you're not going to get credit for what you deserve. And so, yeah, maybe like being out there and being involved and actually like signing up for stuff, like actually my method, if I'd ask for more, like if I hated my job, I'd ask for more because maybe they would give me stuff that was better or like I could make a name and get somebody to know who I was. And I was really fortunate in most of my jobs that were very outward facing and they were visible. Now there's a double-edged sword there, right? I mean, you know, you drop the ball, then everybody's watching, okay? But you hit a home run, everybody's watching. Um, and I think that's super important. And I don't think anybody's career benefits from being quietly competent. It doesn't, I mean, it depends on your ambition, right? I mean, I would not recommend everybody want to be a CFO. It isn't for everybody. I think, there would be people that hate my job, okay? Like my kids would hate my job. And so, but I think you have to figure out, you have to sort of have your eyes on the prize and you have to say, yeah, like that guy or that woman, like I wish I had, and I, especially if you admire these people and you see how good they are and that they're good people with integrity and they're successful and you can like figure out how to get closer to that. And then, um, because I don't think the technicals are the majority of whether you like your job or not. I think a lot of people who are really technically solid and really superior don't like their jobs because of all these sort of intangibles that it's unpleasant or it's no one gives a damn or I could live or die and I don't even know if anybody would care. Like that's sort of what I think drives people into that ditch. And so sometimes, I mean, like I the hardest thing I ever had to do was when I was out of work and you get a job offer and you turn it down. And
Mhm.
I mean, I get upset just thinking about it. And I did it. And I did it for those reasons. I did it because, yes, I needed a job. And yes, it paid me what I thought my market value was. And yes, it was a major corporation, but it looked like I was going to be in the 14th cube on the left that, nobody knew whether I was alive or dead. Like, we don't have punch cards. So if I even didn't come in, like, would they call the police? Like, I don't think so. Like, that would be like, and I did, those are the jobs I turned down. And you don't know, right? When you don't take it, you don't know if it was a good decision or not. And that was the hardest thing in the world to do. But I think I knew myself and I knew the pitfalls and I knew where I was gonna fall down if I wasn't in love with what I was doing. I was just gonna be crummy at it, and that was not I didn't wanna
Mm,
take that chance.
Yeah, what a powerful story and how much courage. Not having a job, having a family to provide for, and turning it down because
I mean,
you knew
I'd
it
tell
wasn't
my
gonna fit.
wife, like, "And I just turned it down." Like, and she was like, "Hey, I know you. I've known you for decades, okay? Like, I know you can't go to work every day if it doesn't turn you on, right?" I mean, that's the reality. And the other thing on that same vein, I mean, I moved around, like, and I moved from Detroit to Connecticut to Eastern Pennsylvania to Dallas. Like, I didn't really want to come to Dallas. Like, I like it and it's fine. But like, it wasn't like, oh my God, I don't want to go to Dallas. Like, no, I had been there on business and it didn't affect me one way or the other. I didn't
The mountains didn't
dislike
really do it for you here.
it. And then, and everybody in Texas thinks like this is like the greatest place in the world. Like, I never got that. But, And so, but I did it because I was Indiana Jones outrunning the ball. Like, that's if the right job was in the place that I didn't necessarily want to be, or that my family didn't necessarily want to be, we had to kind of swallow and kind of make that decision, because the reality was, if it was the right job, it was going to be something we needed to do. I never turned a job down because of a relo. I turned the job down because of all those other things I talked about, and I was scared to death. I was so emotional to be able to do that.
All right. Well, time flies. Adam, is there anything else before we get to our always on questions?
Oh man, I could ask questions forever, but no, I think we can go to the always on questions.
And Larry, just to give you a space too, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to share?
No, I mean, we've covered a lot of ground, and I've meandered all over the place. So,
It's
It's
been
been good.
amazing.
It's been amazing. All right, we have a section where we do a trend spotter, like what trends are you paying attention to? But I'm gonna like lead the witness here because it's not every day you have a crypto expert on and someone who called stablecoins, before they were called. I mean, almost before anybody was talking about them. Now
right.
Circle's public and all the things. So what? Yeah, I'm trying to think like what are stable coins? Like, why are you excited about them? Or like, what should we be thinking about with crypto? I'm just gonna like give you the open forum to talk about crypto.
It's one of these things that can change the world, and I think it can change the world for the better, actually. But it's sort of like, atomic energy. Like, it can change the world, but boy, it's pretty goddamn dangerous. And so, um, and I think there's three kinds of people. I think there's people who learn and understand the risk and choose to take the risk. I think there's people that learn and understand the risk and choose not to take the risk. And then I think there's people that just don't have a clue about risk. Okay. And they don't know whether they're taking risks or not. And what worries me about tokens, financial tokens, let's call them both cryptocurrencies and stablecoin, is that there's been a predominance of that third category, that it's cool, or that like people have made a lot of money and I got to get in, the fear of missing out kind of thing. It's a very dangerous technology that can change the world. And so what's happening is that when you're getting these IPOs now, and then everybody's talking about it, and now the big banks want to do their own, it's becoming legitimized, and all the smart money is moving there, and everybody's in this frenzied rush to understand it. And I've been this guy that basically is explaining its pros and its cons. And it seems like the cons are like, I don't, sometimes I feel like I'm like the only person. It's pretty lonely. Like, the people say, like, I never heard that before. I'm like, well, we did it. Okay. Like, we had exposure. I wrote the risk policy. Okay. We know what can go wrong. There could be a run on at the bank. There could be a mismatch of assets and liability, all these things. And they're like, whoa. But I think we are on, like, we're going to look back, like, at this time, like these next 3 years, that money movement around the world, I think, could fundamentally change. Prices, which are already in this sort of death spiral right now, will go even lower. And there will be this Darwinian struggle that if you can't adopt, if you are not sophisticated or don't have the capital to engage with this technology, you will be left behind. And that is not characteristic of me to say stuff like that. That's how powerful this is. But I'm telling you, I wouldn't be shocked if the next big financial crisis that we have in the world, okay, is not subprime mortgages. It's going to be some sort of cryptocurrency stablecoin thing, because it's just too much of a gold rush right now. And I think that so I think that's the trend. And I wish people would get kind of cool their jets a little bit and maybe study it first and look at the downside. But and people ask me, they ask me the question, like, well, 3 years, or is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? And I'm saying, I think it's probably 3 to 5. Like, I think it's not tomorrow, okay? It's not like January 1st. And I think if you're involved in financial services, and I don't care what angle of it you're in, you need to understand credit. What is really happening, you're just seeing it in the news today and yesterday, like, the big auto dealer Tricolor that blew up. I mean, that was the fault of the lenders not understanding collateral. When you see a stable coin implode, it's because people don't understand the collateral. It's nothing more than a collateralized security. So credit isn't fun and it isn't flashy. These aren't the people that become president of companies. And so, but it's like essential, and we go through these phases. And so I think really the trends is that we're going to need a return to a credit sort of oriented financial system that embraces and studies the risk and choose to accept the risk of tokenization of financial assets. But I think it has to be done very carefully and very studiously, and with people that have a lot of brain power, a lot of capital, and a lot of tech. I think that's really where it's going to.
All right. Sounds like a task for Adam. Don't you work at a payments
I
company,
have a lot
Adam?
of I have a lot of selfish payments questions that I want to ask around that, but a slightly less selfish question. What is the first commercial use case that my mom is going to understand? I just used a stable coin. Like, I think I understand the like B2B use case for stable coins, the cross international lines use cases for stable coins. When does like my mom say, "Oh, I know what a stable coin is and I just did it"?
Okay, I'm gonna answer that. Somebody asked me a similar question just actually on Monday. Um, and this is what I said. Your mom shouldn't care. Your mom shouldn't even
Yeah.
know. Okay? Like, it's the technology behind the app, okay? The beauty of a really good app is you press a button and you swipe and you're done, okay? How the money moves should be of concern to not a single citizen, okay? And the other thing about it is that this apparently terrible old-fashioned technology that we use today, okay? The customer gets instant credit. So theoretically, they shouldn't even see a difference, okay? The only difference they should see is your mom is gonna say, "Wow, I used to pay $5 and now it's $1.99." Okay, the difference. But I would assume, just like when you flip your light switch on, do you know whether it's coal, natural gas, or nuclear? You don't, and you don't care. And it should be the same with stable coins. It's a background technology that the provider uses, not the consumer. And if you're using it as a stored value thing, well, then maybe you live in Argentina or Lebanon or Turkey where your currency is worthless. And now it's a chance for you to own US dollars, and you can basically disintermediate your own economy and circumvent your own central bank. And I don't think central banks are going to take that lying down. So that one, I think, is still in the third inning. I think that this is so in the United States of America, I'm going to say your mom should not care and should not know what a stable coin is.
Love it.
I was hoping she was going to be staking her ETH in a couple of years, but that's probably the more correct answer. Cool.
I love
Thank
it.
you.
Larry, two more questions. One, from your experience, is meaningful work found or created?
I think you have to find it. And I think it goes to that story about turning down jobs. Like you have to know, or at least have a reasonable assumption that what you're going to be doing is important to you and meaningful, and you have to find it. There are a million jobs out there. There's not a million careers. And I think there's a huge difference between careers and jobs. Careers, you have to find the meaning. And meaning can be a lot of things like, do I want my company to make the world a better place, or am I just a capitalist and I just want to, like, you know, make an arb and make money. Like, it can be meaningful both ways. Like, it's up to you, but you have to find it. It's not going to come in your lap. And that's why too, you may need to leave the comforts of your hometown or whatever to find it. You have to find it.
It's good. Is there one thing you want our listeners thinking about as they kind of finish their commute home or take a moment to reflect this weekend?
I just think that especially in sort of the economy that we're living in right now, which appears to me to be weakening materially, going through one of these setbacks, um, you have to understand that it's like absolutely perfectly normal. Like I was lecturing at SMU and I made a comment that actually got one person really upset. I said, I almost look at when I'm looking at resumes, if you've been at the same place for like more than 10 years, I view almost like that's a negative. Like that you're not stretching, you're not getting either people aren't looking for you or you're not looking for them. And I don't think I don't want to be cynical and say, well, every payday the score is even, and so I don't believe in loyalty. Like, you paid me, I did my work. We go home. That's if you work, in the factory. And careers aren't that way. On the other hand, companies don't blink an eye, laying somebody off that's been there 30 years. Okay. So like don't get too like enamored. I do form emotional attachments to like some of the jobs and employers that I've had. And I actually have affection for them and was hurt like when, I had to leave. And then I had to realize that it actually it's painful, it's often humiliating. It's just a difficult time, but actually it's almost like a rite of passage. It's almost like something you have to do. Um and I think you need to keep that in your mind in your whole career. You have to make changes, you have to progress. You can't be in the same job for the next 40 years. You can't. And so would you rather have your hand on the steering wheel and make those changes, or would you rather be a passenger and, wait for something to happen? I think you need to have your hands on the wheel. And sometimes that creates an unpleasant environment. And I do think a lot of people right now, one of the things that I've been struggling with actually, I don't know if you guys have noticed it, but like people go on LinkedIn and they pour their heart out. Like people writing these agonizing long things about like their job searches and they're being ghosted and they're like this. And I don't think that's constructive. As a person who've hired a lot of people and a person I've fired people. Okay. Like I never called somebody up and said, you came in second, but it was like by a tenth of a second. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we didn't hire you. Like, I'm not going to go and tell you the backstory on why you didn't get it. You just have to understand that there was somebody that maybe fit the bill slightly better than you. It doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't mean you're incompetent. It doesn't mean we don't like you. You have to make a choice. There can only be one. And when you in a moment like this, and when you see the contraction of the labor market that's happening in the United States right now, you're gonna hear more and more of these stories, and my view was always like, it was something my fault. Like, I never thought that the employer was the bad guy. I thought I fell down somewhere, or I came in I got the bronze medal, which doesn't get you anything. That's and I just want everybody to know that, like, that's the reality. Like, it's an and I mean, even if, you're listening to this and you love your job and you're in your job right now and you're not, caring the world, it could happen. It's happened to me 4 times in my career, 4 times. And, it didn't get easier. The 4th one wasn't really any easier than the first one. And so but I did was more philosophical about it and say that this, at least in my case, led to better things. and kind of no pain, no gain kind of thing. But it's and I think everybody needs to have that in mind. And the other thing about it too is another football analogy, so apologies here, but you don't get a Super Bowl ring for being the best player on the team. You get a Super Bowl ring for being on the team. Okay. So if you're working for a company that isn't a championship team and you're the best player on that team, you don't get the gold. Okay. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's okay. Like, and I found more meaning actually in working for companies that needed me, that they had problems, that they needed somebody that was actually going to be a problem solver because they had problems. They hadn't licked it. Like, so that's another aspect of it, is that, if you like the culture and you find the work meaningful and you're appreciated for what you do, then maybe like you don't need a Super Bowl ring. And I think it took me 30 years.
Good word. We'll end with that. So thank you so much, Larry, for joining us. It's been an honor and a joy, and I think what you said will continue to reverberate through our listeners' careers. So
Well,
thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Thanks. I enjoyed it.
This show has been brought to you by Arvo Advisory, a new category of consulting company, half management consultancy and half executive communication and PR firm. Arvo works with great leaders to craft and communicate their strategy to achieve change and create valuable companies. Find out more at arvoadvisory.com or follow us on LinkedIn. And finally, if you've been blessed at all by this podcast, please remember to rate and review the show or share it with a friend. And with that, go forth and know that you are loved because of who you are and not because of what you do for work. See you next time.